Hello, this is Patrick Ash. I'm a author, musician, nonprofit worker person. I like to talk about many different topics and video blogging on various things, politics, life, all that stuff. But for this particular video, I want to talk about something a little more, specific and niche or whatever. And that's the Enneagram kind of personality typology. Now, before I get into it, I think personality typologies in general, we have to be kind of careful because, the researcher in my brain, because I'm a program evaluator by trade, and I taught research methods for 4 years part-time at university here in North Carolina. And usually in psychology, we rely, or when researching personality traits, we rely more upon the Big Five assessment, as it's called. That's the one that's been, better replicated, and it's been used in various studies to assess what personality traits are, associated with different, however many variables there are out there. Things like introverted, extroverted, neuroticism, agreeableness, openness. I've referenced openness in my political video because that was one where I scored particularly high. In fact, that's like it's like a blowout. It's like I'm like the 95th percentile, something like that. And I'm missing one. Agreeableness. I'm also fairly high on the agreeableness. Anyway, so there's the Big Five assessment, which is the one used in the scientific stuff. And then there are other assessments that people often will kind of like refute and say, well, that one's not scientific and that's not scientific, which is all well and good. But I think kind of, it's also not super scientific to say, for instance, what Star Wars character am I, or what Lord of the Rings character, whatever it is. To a degree, it's kind of for kicks, for fun, and also it's a little bit philosophic. It's sort of a way of thinking about things that may or may not be beneficial. So that's kind of the lens that I use when I look at the Enneagram, because it's essentially a system that's based upon motivations, and it's broken into like 9 basic types, and within each of those 9, it kind of has 2 subtypes, so for kind of a total of 18. And even within each of those, there's kind of well, I think I said subtype, but there's kind of like each individual has like social, sexual, and self-preservation as like a focus or an order of how they approach the world. So I'm not going too far into the system itself. If you're familiar with it, then basically this is more for those who at least have a basic understanding of it. So I wanted to talk about my type and the frustrations, and particularly a misconception that at least applies in my case and might apply for other cases. And anyway, so my type is the 4w5, and so of course 4 is the individualist in the Enneagram system. So that's kind of like a focus, particularly on like the realm of deep feelings, as I think of it. Like there are other types that are feeling oriented, like the 2, the helper type, and the 3, which is the achiever. But they kind of, have different, like a 2, it's more about practical steps in the outside world, which I'll get to in a minute. And then there's the 3 that's more about like what they can accomplish and use their image kind of like as a springboard to get things done, to be productive. So these kind of tie in with my frustrations or misconceptions, whatever, towards being a 4w5. So 4 is more the deep thinking, what's my meaning in the world, and that's kind of like the motivation. What's the authentic truth, underneath things. It sounds very, kind of, I want to say bohemian. I think bohemian is one of the terms used for it. And then there's the 5 side, which is the investigator. It's the deep thinking. So it's about, understanding things in and of themselves. It's emphasis on like intellect and logic to a degree, rationality. So whereas the 4-wing 3, the 3 has that achiever side. So it's more about, okay, have, individualist feelings and, an interest in being authentic, but that's kind of distilled with the image and getting and being productive in society. So that's the 4-wing 3 versus the 4-wing 5, which is deep feelings, deep thoughts, which I will say for me often feels like, you're just kind of like sinking down into like whatever depths, of, getting lost in your own ocean, I think they say. Okay, this probably is already seeming too weird and abstract. So if you're still with me, that's because you probably know the Enneagram pretty well. So I'm a 4-wing 5, and I have the social subtype. And my order is like social, sexual, and self-pres. Self-pres is last for me. So being a social 4, I've got this kind of a walking contradiction within a walking contradiction. 4s are often accused of being walking contradictions, and it's like, well, I want to be authentic, but that can, when you actually try to implement that into your life, it can kind of fall apart, fall in on itself, if that makes sense. It's like, okay, I want to be, all right, if I'm just gonna make something up, if I'm a manager at a store and I want to be, the best, most authentic one I can be, well, that may mean that I don't make many sales. Okay, well, I'm going to sell what I want to sell, and if that means my business fails, then so be it. And then it's like, okay, now we're not paying our bills, we're going to get shut down. All right, well, I guess I need to dig deeper and find out who I am so that I can, keep being a store owner. So that's one issue there. But being a social 4-wing 5, it's 4-wing 5s are introverted, quite introverted, and I've for sure been that way. But having a social subtype, that means we're most concerned with the outside world. That presents quite a challenge, and I speak from experience. So I'm constantly, I will say, now speaking about me personally, I have heard pretty much my whole life, you care too much what other people think. I've heard that so many times, I can't tell you. I've heard that from, kind of friends and family. I've heard it from close friends for sure. And yet, at the same time, it's like I kind of live my life in such a way, in my career choices, and in, as you can see, this is my little happy den here. And yet, I've had people critique and say, like, this doesn't look very adult, and you need to be dressed up more often, and all that kind of thing. And so it's like, well, I want to be authentic, and yet I also want to connect with people, and the connection is what makes it's kind of, you're trying to go forward and backward and left and right and up and down all at the same time. And so that's kind of the frustration. And people also commonly critique 4s and saying, you are so self-pitying. I've heard that many times, including recently. And you feel sorry for yourself and you wallow, and you really just need to put all that aside and just get out there and do things. Which, again, like, these are fair critiques. And one of my, I'd say, issues or frustrations with being a 4-wing 5 is that it's like, I was speaking personally, but I feel like others could relate to this. Like, that you're kind of lost in your thoughts and your feelings, and you're trying to break out of that. You're like, okay, it's not enough for me. I think it's a quote from Bruce Lee, actually. It's like, knowing is not enough, you must apply. Like, it's not enough to have all those thoughts and feelings. You need to turn them into something. So if you're an artist, if you're a writer, then it's not enough to have these awesome book ideas in your head. You're like, all right, well, write the book. Which to others, in the other types may sound pretty straightforward, but for us, we're like, oh, well, I need to have it just right, and it needs to be like this. And I've absolutely had those feelings, but as we know, those of you that follow the system, like the 4 integrates toward 1, and the 1 is more objective. They understand like how to make a decision. They're not super, like, I think that's the difference between a 4 and a 1, is that 4s tend to be very indecisive, like, oh, I'll do this, do I do this, do I do that? And again, especially 4w5, and integrating toward 1, it's like, oh, that's what I need to do. Like, I need to turn these thoughts and feelings into an action. I'll say in my career, that's been, well, I care deeply about different issues, and so what? I might have deep thoughts and feelings about those, but that ultimately, it doesn't mean anything unless we're turning it into action. And so by integrating toward 1, it's like, okay, I've got action steps. And I think some of the commentators I've followed on YouTube have said things like, like when you turn to action, when you decide I'm going to break out of my mind and try to take steps, that's when you are arguably being your true, most authentic self, because you're not just kind of wallowing, you're not getting lost in your own mind or whatever. Now, the misconception I kind of wanted to address, because I see this, I think, in some of the same videos. I don't know if I should name who it is, but it's a common thing. I've heard it and read it in different places, is that being 4 means you take great kind of, I don't want to say pride, because I think pride is the sin associated with a 2. I think envy is what's associated with a 4, and that I agree with. We'll get to that in a minute. But is that like you almost celebrate the fact, like, oh, I'm so different, I'm so unique, my thoughts, my ideas are so, I'm so different from other people, and that there's some, I don't want to say it's pride, but that you kind of enjoy it. And I'll say for the most part, I do not find that to be the case. In fact, I made an observation when I was in college, like towards the end of my experience. I'm like, when I look at others who feel like they're different and they're unique and they see themselves as separate from other people, which sounds very fourish on the surface, like they seem to like that. And I almost think someone like that is maybe a 1 that's disintegrating to 4, because their default is still kind of black and white, binary, one thing or another. And so it's like, oh, I'm different from other people. And that gives me some kind of good feeling. Could possibly be a 2 that's kind of on the average, like an average 2 with the arrow, shows that they can be kind of 4ish. When they are kind of taking pride and saying like, oh, well, I'm such a good and caring person, that's what makes me special. And so that's kind of the average side of a 2. And then there's also the 5 side, and I think one of the differences between a 4 and a 5, and I think even a 4-wing 5 versus a 5-wing 4, and one of my best friends is a 5-wing 4, is that I think 5s almost enjoy not being understood. It's like, I'm so deep in my thoughts and my intellect that others can't follow. Well, I must be doing something right. I'm not saying it's a healthy thought, but that I think that is more likely to be a 5 thought. Whereas a 4, being wallowing and whatever, I'm feeling misunderstood. It's like, I want people to understand it, and they're just not. And I'll say that's the thought that I have all the time. That, it's a constant thought. It's like, oh, I feel like they're so close, they've almost got it, and they don't. Or I think I can relate to people in these ways, and then no, at the last minute they said that something makes a comment that makes it clear that they don't understand. And objectively, who's right, or like, is it true they do or don't understand? Ultimately, who knows? You can't get too deep with this stuff, right? But like when talking about personal ideas or preferences or whatever, I will say for me, like I feel in those moments that I want to connect with somebody, that I don't want it just to be, well, you live your life, I live my life, and it's not that I'm trying to convert them, like, or like even with like political disagreements or whatever. It's not like, oh, you have to agree with me. Like for me, it's not that. That's not the idea. That's not the feeling. It's more of the I just want you to understand where I'm coming from. There's a of all bands. This is I typically listen to hard rock and heavy metal, but of all the bands, there's a lyric from Goo Goo Dolls, from Iris, that I think really kind of sums up this four dilemma in the chorus, where it says, when everything's made to be broken, I just want you to know who I am. And that line comes to mind often, where like you're in a frustrating situation. I'll say for me currently, as I mentioned in I think my intro video, COVID has hit my career hard. I was already kind of on shaky ground. I fear that my better days are behind me. It's a scary thought. And so it's like I keep being in situations where I'm like, okay, maybe this will work out. Maybe this will be the one that leads me to a better path, that leads me to become more authentic, if you will. And then it doesn't work out. You know, I get the rejection, or I don't hear any responses, or I kind of get tested in a way that I feel like is judging me in a superficial way. That's very 4-ish, and that's something I relate to highly, is like the feeling judged over something that's like petty. It's like little, it's like, okay, I have always good ideas, big ideas, and they respond to me by saying, you're emailing me at 1 o'clock in the morning. Well, you need to get more sleep. Maybe after you sleep on things, you'll give me a better response, or something like that. And you're just like, the hell? You know, what about the substance of what I said? It's just a made-up example. But anyway, so, but this misconception I'm referring to is that there's any kind of enjoyment in feeling misunderstood. I feel like that's more of could be a 5w4 thing. It could be a 1 disintegrating to 4, or a 2 that's on the average, you know, when they're feeling prideful. I just don't think that's a 4th. And I realize even by saying this, it's very 4-ish to be like, you still don't understand. I just think it's a type of misconception. Because, you know, I really seek understanding. That's like such a big thing. And there are moments, let me be more optimistic and be positive. There are moments where I do feel understood, and I'm like, that's it, right there. I'll give a prime example of that. A fellow 4w5, the poems, the lyrics, the songs of Leonard Cohen. He is a 4w5. He is asexual versus, you know, me being social. But when I read his poetry, his lyrics, when I listen to his songs, I'm like, that's it. It's like he has summed up thoughts and feelings that I've had before, and, you know, took the words out of my mouth, or said it, or I couldn't say it better. And other times it's not even just lyrics. It could be listening to, I'll use another 4w5, Ludwig van Beethoven. For some reason, these become controversial. The hell if I know why. But part of his importance in kind of the canon of classical music is that he was the kind of intermediary between classical and romantic, between those different eras of music. And classical was more of the Enlightenment age, of the more thinking, if you will. It's a little more 5-ish. You know, it's kind of led by Mozart, who was a 7, but anyway, but leading from classical into romantic, which of course sounds very 4-ish. So he was kind of at that point in history and in his development as an artist to be one who is mindful of like the structure and kind of the rules, if you will, of classical music, and yet also using it as a vehicle for expressing emotions, deep thoughts and feelings. And of course, when you listen to his piano sonatas and his symphonies, you know, you can hear kind of like that, both the structure and the ideas, being fueled by kind of the classical side of things, but then it leads into kind of more bombast and subtlety and nuances that are a little more romantic. And I say this because, I listen to Beethoven. It's one of those I feel understood. I feel like, it just hits. I could also talk about Hendrix and how Hendrix and Countless Wood. He was, I think, a 4w3, but still, his importance in the development of rock music, can't be overstated. And sorry, kitty cat's over here. But similarly, he had that sensitivity and that individualism where it's like, okay, I'm going to take some of the things that have been done before and I'm going to make them my own. And sure, I will kind of follow some of these conventions just as tools, because I'm going to use them also to express myself, to really kind of lead music in a direction with my own kind of my own tone, my own personality. And of course, he was one of the figureheads that kind of launched different genres just by his own guitar playing. So anyway, so I just wanted to talk about that misconception in general, that I don't think, at least for me, maybe for other 4w5s, that I don't really celebrate that feeling of being different. I kind of mourn it. I often kind of want to connect with others, both other fours and other personality types of any kind. Like I'm most mournful, and fours are associated with tragedy, with what I've lost, and I often feel like I don't belong, and then I'm kind of like from another world, that I'm alien, if you will. And so in any given situation, it's like I actually kind of, like one of the things I've heard about fours, they say like, well, fours are always projecting their uniqueness. They're either really dark or really quirky, and then you can see I'm wearing a college sweatshirt and jeans, and you probably look at me like, oh, you look very plain and typical and whatever. And it's like, yeah, because what that is that's me trying to fit in, if you will. It's like, well, I don't feel the need to be like my authentic self. Like, I don't feel the need to be super trendy, to be like wearing designer brands or anything like that, or wear really nice, pretty clothes. But I do desire to express kind of like a subtle sense of connection, of like, well, I'm not so different from the outside world, and I feel like, we've got some things in common, right? It's kind of wistful, I think is the word I would use. And so, I usually am kind of plain or nondescript, because for me, it's like this, I want to stand out kind of in the right ways, if you will. So that's with my creativity, like with my ideas in my career, with my books. Check out Upon This Pale Hill. It's an awesome novel, very four-ish. For any 4w5s out there, it's very four-ish. And my upcoming, maybe it's released by the time I post this, typical tragedies and book of poetry. The title right there, very four-ish. I want to roll my eyes myself about that. So I have two books that are, kind of interrelated with my Enneagram type. So between my writings, between my music, and in my career, where I've tried to, in each position that I've been in, I'll be in for a few years, I try to like implement ideas that are based upon the big picture thoughts and feelings, and then get disappointed with, well, it's not going very far. It's not going very far. And now I'm in a job search where it's like, damn, it feels like, no matter what I do, it's like I'm always back at square one. This, I'll say, is what I do not like about being a four. Like, I may like the creativity side, I'm coming up with ideas, or I'm writing books and they're expressing who I am. But I don't like the impracticality. I was talking with someone recently who made the observation, it's like, this is where the envy of the 4 comes in. Just like you are envious that other people, find it so much easier to be practical, so that when they take action steps, they see results. Like, whereas you, Patrick, take action steps and you get turned down over and over again, even for little things. I was lamenting how I've been turned down for a job that like I was pretty well overqualified for. But yet it's like, okay, there's too many applicants right now for jobs I am qualified for, so I'm going for some of the less qualified ones, but I still don't get them because I guess they see me as overqualified. I don't know. I'm not saying I'm hot shit or whatever. It's just I've got a certain level of like mid-career experience, and it's like not getting those. So let me go step down, and then I'm still not getting those because I guess they're writing me off. I don't know. That's speculation. But the envy side of a 4, speaking personally, like could be more, especially for a 4-3, could be more on the material side. But I think it's more about what I call jealousy over opportunities. And that's what gets to me. Where not so much I want material things, I want status or whatever. Like even the whole being seen as unique thing, like, yeah, but it's more like having a sense of purpose. Not just, oh, I'm unique, but also I'm unique and I have a place in the world, Like I think fundamentally every whatever personality type you want to have some sense of purpose, some sense of like I'm contributing to the world. And for being a 4, it's like, okay, I'm so different and unique. I kind of after a while kind of get sick of hearing it. It's like, all right, well, to integrate to the 1, it's like, well, you would be finding ways to apply that in the world. In anything, you could be an architect and say, well, I have just such different ideas about the best way to, make this building or this bridge or whatever it is. But just no one's taking me up for their contract. And I keep, lowering, my fee or whatever. And yet they still just won't listen to me. They keep rejecting me. So for me, being in program evaluation, I often will kind of run the data, look at the results, and say, all right, here's what I think our action steps are. I'll put some recommendations out there, and you can kind of take them or leave them. And what I would hope the conversation would be is, all right, either, yeah, we agree and we're going to do these things, or no, I don't think we quite see it that way. So we're going to go a different direction instead. What's more frustrating is when it's just, I'll do an impression when it's like, okay, that's nice. Like, any feedback, anything I can do better? Is there something missing? I mean, I haven't had the experience where some people just like, they're never happy. It's just like, why don't you do run the numbers this way? All right, I'll do that. You come back and like, well, now you should run them this way. Okay, I'll do that. And it's like, no matter what you do, they're just not happy. But I mean, that's super frustrating. And side note, I usually don't get along with Enneagram 8s. Not that they are not also as important as anybody else, but the kind of the being so brash and bold, because they say 4s and 8s are kind of the inverse of each other. We're sensitive and gushy on the outside, but we have more of a hardcore. It's a very pretentious way of saying it, I think. But for an 8, it's like they have that tough, hard exterior. They want to get things done. But you cut beneath it and they get really sensitive. Certain famous politician is a good example of that. Just don't want to go there right now. All right, but anyway, so what's more frustrating for me on the work front is not so much agreeing or disagreeing, like, a little bit. It's when there's just indifference, apathy, when they're just sort of like, all right, that's nice. Like, so should I do it differently? Should I do it this way? And they're just sort of like, no, that's fine, whatever. And they just don't give you anything to work for. And then one day they decided, no, I don't think we have much use for you. I'm saying this just because the one time in my 10, 12, however many years career, again, COVID hit my interest hard. So I could complain a lot about that, but whatever. So trying to loop back around. So the misconception that I'm wanting to fight is that there's any kind of celebration and feeling different. For me, it's more mournful. It's more, no, because ultimately I want to connect. I want to have a purpose. I want all my thoughts and feelings and deep, all my books and my music and whatever, I want them to connect with people and not just be like, oh, that's weird, quirky stuff, whatever. Being kind of indifferent or, unimportant, lacking purpose. I think that's when it gets really dark and scary. So yeah, that's, I know I'm at half an hour now. I probably got other thoughts on this, but hopefully there are other Enneagram people out there who, have thoughts. Maybe this resonates, maybe it doesn't. Maybe at some point I'll talk about relating with other types. Again, I often don't get along with 8s. They're important, they're great people, but let's say can be. All the types can be great or not. Or talk about interpersonal relationships. A lot of my closest friends are in the 4 or 5 area, but I married a 2. But I will say right there, it's like, well, 2s are practical. And there's that envy of, oh, but they get things done. I mean, I would argue on the work front I do too, but I kind of like uniqueness and importance, in my books and my music. That's kind of, I would say, gets, much less attention than the things that aren't as important to me. Like, oh, I can run statistics reports. Cool, that hopefully that's useful, but ultimately I want, my kind of more authentic expressions, like, books and music and ideas. I want them to serve a purpose in the world, and that's kind of like the ultimate goal. So anyway, hopefully some of this made sense, and yeah, let me know what you think. Thank you.